You are listening to ProveText, a Glossa House podcast exploring Scripture with Dr. T. Michael W. Halcomb and Dr. Fredrick J. Welcome and enjoy.
Hello, welcome to ProveText. I am Michael Halcomb, and here with me is my friend, Dr. Fred Long. Fred, how you doing?
Hey, all right. It's spring here, warm then cold, sunny but cold. We had like 80 degrees weather last week, and now it's, in the 60s, sunny, but with a chill, and it's gotten down to the 30s. So it's beautiful, birds are out, but it's a little bit chilly, especially when it was 80 for like 2 or 3 days in a row. It felt great. And so anyway, yeah, you doing well out there?
Well, yeah, it's about it's about that time of season where you live, where all the pollens and stuff start coming on strong, and everybody's allergies start shutting them down and making everybody's head feel clogged and eyes itchy and throat scratchy and all that stuff.
Yeah, I just stopped taking my allergy meds. I mean, I have for a while now, and I'm not sure I'm noticing much. It's kind of nice not to have to take it, but yeah, people suffer here, and maybe I would feel better if I took it, but I'm just like so tired of it. But yeah, pollen, yellow coating all over the place. Yeah.
Yeah, I usually during that summer to fall and then winter to or spring to summer or whatever, like twice a year I would just get knocked out for a day from that season change. Yeah, I don't really have that so much here. We have different issues here, like we have this thing called VOG, which is short for volcano fog. So when the volcano is emitting smoke on the big island, it'll like travel all the way here to our island, and same thing, give you itchy eyes, scratchy throat, and headache, and make you tired and all that.
Really?
So,
I've never heard of that. Is this called VOG?
Yep.
VOG?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think it's a, what do you call that linguistically, a portmanteau, where you smash two words like that together to make a new
Conceptual
word.
blending. It's called conceptual blending.
Yeah.
It occurs all the time. It's a fascinating.
Yes.
It's so clever when you hear those words that are mashed together. I always like to joke about supervision. When I see someone standing around watching other people work, I'm like, oh, you're the designated supervisor.
Yeah, there you go. I used to have in place I used to live in Kentucky, it was a big walk-in closet, but I turned it into my office and called it the Cloffice.
There's one with the word volunteer to be on a committee, and I'm not remembering what it's called. Volunteered?
Voluntold.
Yeah, voluntold to be on the committee. Oh, they're so clever. I mean, and whenever I hear one, I'm like, oh, I'll remember that one, and then I can't do it. I'm the same way when it comes to jokes, but we're so clever. I mean, just as people, I love this. The conceptual blending is just fascinating, and we're quick at doing it. And apparently, according to the theorists, they link it to our survival. That we have to we do this really quickly, almost instinctively. We're just very quick at it, and it helps us somehow survive, according to their theories of survival.
Huh. Interesting. Well, let's get to it, shall we? We're still talking about Galatians, and we're still in Galatians 4, but we're almost to the end of that. So let me pull the text up here, and we'll get going. Galatians 4:28 and 29 in this episode. So I'm going to read here, and we'll see what we got, and if we got anything with pronunciation going on. Imiste adafü kata Isaac evangelias Tekna este. Sorry. Tekna este.
Mm-hmm.
Just a couple of things that I notice. You have the Isaac here. When a word begins with iota, there's a couple of ways you can do that. You can do the Y sound, like ye, or just do the E. So you could say Isaac or Isaac. It takes a little less effort to just do the Isaac. Then you have the repetition of the vowel there. And so when that happens, there's a couple ways you can do it as well. You can do Isaac, like syllabify it almost. Or you can just hold out the alpha, the double letter, for, a slight second longer. Isaac.
Mm.
So Isaac sounds a little bit different with that Isaac than Isaac.
So
right?
Isaac is allowable?
Yeah,
Isaac.
Isaac. You're just going to hold it elongated, just a hair of a fraction of a second more. Isaac. And then, so you have that vowel clash going out, right? This would have been a good place for Paul to do kat Isaac, right? Instead of that kata. So it is raising some questions. Why is he including all this vowel clash here? Here you have you miss the other few, so that epsilon, that alpha, but also you see evangelias. This is a tricky word. This is one of those words when people are switching to kep that they'll find tricky, and there's two reasons for this. You have that double gamma, which we know that turns the first gamma to like an N sound, right? So we get epang. And even Erasmian follows that rule. But now we have a gamma followed by an epsilon, and if you watch the previous episode, you heard me say that that when an epsilon follows a gamma, it turns that gamma into a Y. So now the question is, should this be pronounced epangelias, like epangelias? No, because this consonant cluster, this consonant pair comes first, ang. So we're just going to stick with that, angelias. Yeah. So that's the one environment in which gamma precedes an epsilon and it doesn't turn into the Y sound. Yeah. So then we get vowel clash again, but with the alpha and epsilon again. So yeah, those are some of the things that I'm seeing here. What are you seeing?
Well, let me translate. So I see a de, which is making a next step in the argument, new development. I'm seeing the umis at the start. Umis means you, plural. And then you have a vocative, adelphi. But you, brothers or siblings. Yeah. Are children according to the children of promise according to Isaac. Yeah, so some interesting things there. The umis at the front is, I think, a left dislocated topic. So the umis, the you is found in the verb at the very end. The este, the last word in verse 28, means you are. So you technically don't need the umis at the start.
Yeah, that's called pro-drop.
Pro-drop?
Yeah? Pro-drop. Yeah, when you have these languages like Greek that are pro-drop languages where you could just drop that pronoun because you don't even need it. It's already embedded in the verb.
So when it occurs, there's some kind of prominence or some kind of special emphasis of some sort. And here, it's participating in a bit of a contrast. So it's introducing the topic, which is put out to the far left. That's why it's called a left dislocated topic. And it's picked back up by the verb. And I think these are used for when there is a slight disjunction with what's gone before. So he Paul just ended in verse 27 by talking about, or in the mind's eye, more than the children of the woman having the husband. So he ends with those kind of children. But then he says, but you, brethren, what kind of children are you? You are children of promise. You are children of promise according to Isaac. So I see that
That's
as
a really interesting way to word
it
it.
is. And there is focus, stress on the promise. The word promise is a genitive. Evangelias is fronted before tekna. And so when you have a genitive noun placed in front of its head noun that it's modifying, it's usually for some effect. And here I would say it's stressing the promised nature of these children. I mean, we're talking about prophetic fulfillment here, really. And this I'm reminded of Galatians 3, where Paul is talking about Abraham, who had faith, and there are sons of Abraham that have faith like Abraham. And so Paul's been kind of working out this argument, and he's at this point now talking about these two types of children. You have two types of mothers. One's in Jerusalem above, which is free, and then there's one that is earthly and is enslaved. And we're going to see that there's actually enmity between these two types of children. There's actually some kind of conflict. And this relates to the context because Paul, we saw in Galatians 4:12 to 20, is transitioning to address, he mentions those who are seeking you to cut you off. So there's some pressure, some social pressure, probably even persecution being applied to those of the Galatian church by these people who want to cut them off. And then, so he mentions these opponents, these rivals. And then in 21, which is the start of this allegory section, this typology that Paul is developing, he says, speak to me, those of you who want to be under the law. Don't you hear what the law is saying? And then he starts working out a scripture analogy, typology, and he's working scripture. He's kind of explaining. He's seeing some patterns, and now he's coming out and saying, you are the promised children. You're children that come from this promise, and this promise, this gospel, was preached ahead of time to Abraham. And so you're children of promise according to Isaac. And so here we have Sarah's child. Sarah was the barren woman who couldn't bear, has this child of promise who is Isaac. And those who have faith in Christ are children of Abraham, akin to and likened to Isaac, who are being born out of the promise of God to reverse the fortunes of people. And we're going to see after in the next verse that there was actually persecution between the two children, just as there were persecution, an antagonistic relationship between Hagar's son Ishmael and Sarah's son Isaac. There was conflict between the two. So yeah, this verse 28 has a topical switch by introducing the you. Paul calls them siblings, literally brothers, and also identifies them as children with the fronted genitive modifier of promise. So maybe translate that you are the promised children according to Isaac. And the kata Isaac is the standard. The kind of way that God has done things. In the example of Isaac, he's doing the same kind of things now. And that's what Paul is bringing to bear to the situation. And when we look at verse 29, we're going to see how that is also paralleled in the circumstance.
I might translate this a little differently. Like I like the trying to follow word order. I mean, we do that principle in our illustrated and our commentaries, and I try to stick with that in my sermon translating and all that. So this like, moreover, or well, you yourselves, siblings, with Isaac, are children of the promise. So rather than like according to and treating that according to Isaac, more of a with, and I think that kind of changes the the tenor of it a little bit. Um, Maybe it gets at the same idea, and then the question, well, why not a meta, right? But kata can also function as a with.
Can it?
Um, yeah. So can
I don't think so.
here you go. Kata, yeah, kata with the accusative uh, can function as can have the connotation of with or in accordance with.
Well, in accordance with,
Yeah.
I would agree with, but you can't take the accordance off in my view. So yeah, I'm looking at the lexicon and BDAG for kata with the accusative, which, we don't know whether this is accusative or genitive, but with the
Yeah.
genitive, it means down or against. And that's not the sense here. And I don't see it meaning with.
Yeah, right here, even LSJ talks. Well, no, that's not.
So
Sorry.
in,
Yeah, here you
according
go.
to,
LSJ has some.
in conformity with, or in accordance with, you can't take off the in accordance or the in conformity, because that's the instrumental part of it. So you can't say, look, it can mean
Well,
with
you
because it can
can. You
mean in
just don't
accordance
agree
with.
with it.
No. Well, we might have to
I
agree
think
to
it captures.
disagree.
Yeah, I think it captures the same sense, but um, this, according to Isaac, bothers me. I don't like that.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, so with respect to, in relation to, maybe that will
So
help
then you're doing
you.
like a
The
accusative of reference or something there.
Yeah, the
Um,
NASB, which I tend to like that translation, although it's got all kinds of flaws, but it has like Isaac, and you, brethren, like Isaac, are children of promise. And that's kind of
mhm.
interesting. Um,
Yeah, with then is getting at the same idea as like.
yeah, in line with.
So it's more of a corporate like along with Isaac rather than like Isaac appointed this and according to him. I
Yeah,
mean, Isaac
yeah,
doesn't really say or do anything in Genesis that like would give him this authority. I mean, I know we worship the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, but still,
yeah.
um, Isaac. Yeah, I don't know. So it's kind of
What, and I
interesting.
think,
Like,
yeah, I mean, this is helpful. What is the function of kata? It's setting a
yes,
standard with the accusative. It's a standard. So there's some principle at play here that I'm not sure, like captures, but there is some sense
yeah,
of correspondence, which includes some kind of comparison. So anyway, this is just the complexity of Greek is how to render uh, these
yeah,
phrases is difficult, and you need to unpack them. I mean, I think that's why you need good teachers and preachers who can unpack the underlying Hebrew and Aramaic and the Greek, because there really are some profound
yeah,
ideas that are hard to translate well, and so you have to kind of explain them. Yeah,
yes. I as a preacher, like I know a lot of people have like qualms about using the Greek or Hebrew or you mentioning Latin, because there's some Latin in scriptures, like in or Aramaic, whatever, in a sermon. But I don't. I tend not to shy away from that. I'm not going to give like a huge excursus, but like in this instance, if I were preaching this, I would definitely be saying, "Hey, there's this word kata here, and it can have,
Mhm.
uh, several different meanings in Greek, and here to me it seems like with is a very good option. Although in accordance with might be another way we could put it. Like, I don't have any trouble mentioning that. In fact, if anything, I want to help build up the congregation's Greek vocabulary, Greek awareness. And then on that same note, I want to warm people up to the biblical languages, and rather than like keep them away from them. There's the reality that I've heard so many churches. There's a student I went to seminary with who was talking about his Sunday school teacher used to carry. So when he was a little kid and he would go to Sunday school class, his Sunday school teacher would bring in the Greek New Testament and teach from that to the kids, right? And then one day, like, either a note card fell out or a page fell out or something, and he found it on the floor and it had Greek all over it. And he like took it and, he held on to that for years and years and years and like looked at that, and it just like, it culminated in him getting various degrees, including a PhD in biblical studies, all because this one person in church was warming people up to Greek. And surely that's not going to happen for everybody, but if by me mentioning Greek or Hebrew or Latin or whatever in a sermon can warm people up to that and in the long run pay off for even just one person, then to me it's worth it. I know Mark Ward, for example, the guy who used to work at Logos, he may still just wrote a really popular blog post on the Logos platform saying, like giving this a bunch of reasons why we pastors, preachers shouldn't use Greek in their sermons. And, I agree with some of it, but I don't agree with it all. I think there are plenty of opportune times to do it. And I would say that, look, if you don't know the languages, don't use them and don't act like you do. But what really, are good with the languages, sometimes it can help you bring out things and help people to see things that aren't there. And you never do it as a pastor to be like, oh, I know the languages and you don't, like that kind of thing, like to make yourself look smart. It's always about discipleship. And this might be one of those instances where I'd say, hey, there's some discussion here about this short word, kata. It's a preposition, and that could maybe influence how we understand what's being said. So
Yeah.
I don't know, just on a little tangent.
No,
there,
it's helpful.
yeah.
It's a question that comes up
Really,
commonly. How much Greek or should we refer to it or not? And yeah, I'm in agreement with you there, I think.
yeah. Anyways, I don't know if there really is a such thing as a tangent. Anyways, I maybe should stop saying on a tangent, but I don't know if there's any such thing as tangents. That tangents might get too much credit. Everything is like interweaved, right? Like everything's connected, and these ideas overlap and flow into each other. And
yeah.
Well,
ready for verse 29?
Let's do 29. Oh, here we go. That's interesting. He starts by saying, Al osper tote o kata sarka. Yenethis edioke ton kata pneuma. Utos kenun. That's interesting as well. So you can see what he does here to avoid that vowel clash. Allah osper. He drops off the alpha there at the end, and so we get what is that called, Fred? I can't think of the word. Yeah, elision. Thank you very much. So you got that elision going on there. The alpha is dropped off, so we avoid vowel clash. And C, what I was saying, that alternating principle, consonant vowel. And I don't think I stressed it as a reading, but you have the double lambda, al, hold it out for a second, and then here too, yenethis, just hold it out for yenethis. You can hold it out for a second if you want, but don't have to, I guess. There's the gamma followed by an epsilon. That's important. Yeah, I think that's all I'm seeing with regard to what I'd like to say. Paul does a pretty good job compared to the previous verses of avoiding vowel clash here, but there's still a couple instances, toteo, and then pneuma utos. Otherwise, and they have some consonant clash here, utos ke, although that flows pretty well into each other. Yeah.
All right. So interesting how we translate this, because it begins with Allah, which normally follows a negative statement like an uk, with uk or may, words that negate something. We don't have a negation in verse 28. So literally, Allah is a correction. So I think there is an implied idea here, probably something like, so you're now children of promise, like Isaac, and there's no problems. But just as, so here's how I would translate verse 29, but just as at that time, the child born according to the flesh was persecuting the child born according to the Spirit, thus also now it is the case.
Let me ask you a question before you
Sure.
go into this. So, is there a name for what's going on with like this tone, right? The way you translated that was the child. Is there a word to describe how that is implying that? I don't know. I don't know if you understand what I'm asking, but we don't have tone uion or tone
it's
teknon, right?
elliptical, I think is what I would call it. So I'm looking at A.T. Robertson's word picture. Sometimes he'll identify some of these figures or these words there, but I would call it ellipsis. There's something implied. So it's literally the one according to the Spirit. So what the kata pneuma is functioning like an adjective. So prepositional phrases can be adverbial or adjectival, and this one is functioning adjectival, and it's functioning really like an adjective in a substantive use of the adjective. So that article then is substantiving this prepositional phrase. Substantiving means making it function like a noun. It functions like a noun.
So do you leave that? So if you're going to print a translation of this, do you leave it as the one according to the Spirit, or do you go on and say the child according to the Spirit? How do you translate this?
The child would be neuter, to kata pneuma, because teknon is neuter. So what we have here is, well, it may be assuming huios, son, huion. So I would say the one born by the standard of the flesh was persecuting the one born by the standard of the Spirit.
Oh, I see. So would it be that a form of yenethis would be implied here?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, not teknon or weon. Yeah, so that phenomenon. So you're just calling it, what did you ellipsis?
Yeah. Ellipsis. It's when you can resupply a missing element is in the context.
Okay.
So yeah.
Of course, familiar with that term, but I didn't realize. So like the elliptical article or something like that?
Well, no, because the article.
I want a really technical name for that article.
Well,
substantival ellipsis. What's going on? Like
I think there's an implied
maybe I'm trying to force
yenethis, or it would be.
Got you. Like
it'd be yene. How would the form be? It'd be the yene. We'd have to put it into masculine accusative. Yeah. Thes. Oh, thentos, thenta. So it'd be yene thenta. So
ton yene thenda.
Thenta. Mm-hmm. kata pneuma. So yeah, I think that's what's implied, and that's just often just for efficiency sake, communicative efficiency. Yep. So ellipsis, this occurs a lot. You can imply it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's good. Sorry, I
No, that's
interrupted you,
fine.
but
Well,
yeah,
I'm not sure. There's
it's good
not
to get
there's
that.
really not much else. I mean, well, I guess there's lots to talk about, but this is a correspondence clause. I would consider it. So you get a correction with a law, and I think there's an implied, and so there was no there was no problems, but there actually is a problem, and then you have a ospare clause, which is rather marked. The pair, the os pair is a little particle. It's like a little adverbial word that gets added on to other words. In fact, it doesn't even, it never occurs alone. You can look up pair in the lexicon, but it never occurs by itself. It's a particle. The BDAG says, the lexicon says, with intensive and extensive force, compounded onto other words. So diopair, eon pair, kapha pair. Yeah. So
Kapha
here we
pair, yeah.
have os pair. So os pair is setting a comparison. So it's the pair is ramping that up just a little bit. So just as in fact at that time. So that's how I would translate os per tote, just as in fact at that time. And so then there's this comparison, and then the target of this comparison are the last three words, utos, thus, or in the same manner, ke, meaning also here, noon, now, thus also now. So the main clause actually, that's the main clause. It's not even stated. The just as clause, just as in fact, is the subordinate clause, and then the main sentence is implied. It really
So
is.
the idea here being that Ishmael was persecuting
Yes.
Isaac,
Yep. And so now
and
there's a
that
persecution
the
taking place.
Galatians are.
There's a
Say it
persecution
again.
taking place now. And this
Is he casting the Galatians in the role of Ishmael,
I don't think so.
and himself in the role of Isaac? Like, who's who?
Okay. So rhetorically, if I'm correct, that this is the beginning of the refutation section where you refute the opponents. Paul has mentioned the opponents in verse like 19, 18, the ones who want to cut you out. Verse 17, actually. They're zealous for you, but they want to cut you out. And that word cut out in verse 17 is ekklesia, which sounds a lot like ecclesia. So they want to cut you out. So I think that they're persecuting and putting pressure upon the Galatians, the recipients of the letter. So I think Paul is basically calling them out right now and aligning them with the present day Jerusalem, which is in contrast to the above Jerusalem, which is free. The present day Jerusalem, he says, is enslaved, and so are her children. And then he develops this analogy using Zion typology from Isaiah 54, but also the Sarah Hagar story. He kind of blends those together, and now he's popping out with saying, just as there was persecution back then, thus also now. And that's the main sentence, is also now it is the case. So there's no verb, but it's implied, it is the case, thus also now. So this is a powerful point that he's making. It's very marked because it's a correction that doesn't really even have a proper negative that precedes it. So this is a bit startling because we have to supply a correction. like a negated thing that preceded the correction. Not this, but this. And so, yeah, I think this is very intriguing discourse, and it's getting close to the situation at hand that Paul is writing to address. So you have the verb dioken, which is an imperfect from dioko, which means to pursue or persecute. So that's in the imperfect here. It's imperfect tense, which is stating ongoingness. This is ongoing. He was the one born according to the flesh, was repeatedly persecuting and pursuing the one according to the Spirit. So also it is now. Yeah, so the ongoing nature is stressed by
Yeah.
the imperfect indicative there.
So this is just like a layered analogy. I mean,
Yeah.
you have, so just kind of taking stock real quick, right? You have Sarah. You have Hagar, the foreigner, and Sarah. And you have Hagar gives birth to Ishmael. Sarah's barren, but eventually gives birth to Isaac. So you have Sarah and Hagar competing. You have Isaac and Ishmael competing.
Today,
And Hagar.
and
Sorry, say it
and in
again.
Paul's day, you had Paul and his missionary rivals competing. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm
Sorry.
getting there. So I was just gonna say, then you have Hagar and Ishmael. They are linked with.
Earthly.
They're described as sort of persecutors, and they are linked with a now
Correct. Yeah.
Jerusalem, and all of that is being used to say that the troublemakers in Galatia are from that line, and they are like that
Yeah,
whole string
those
of
who
thought.
want to be under
Whereas
the
over here
law.
you have Sarah and Isaac and an above Jerusalem, and faithful Galatians are being characterized along that track. They are people
Yes.
of the promise versus people of the curse, as it were. And Paul is telling the people of the promise, hey, don't cave in to the people of the curse. And essentially he's also telling people of the curse, you were once people of the promise, or you could be people of the promise, but you're settling for the curse instead. Why not be people of the promise, children of the promise? And so it's a lot to like untangle here, because there's a lot of various people and places and ideas involved.
I think how you laid it out
It's
was very
interesting.
helpful. You basically made a mental map, a chart. I like organizing things in charts just to keep track of it. But I think that's what we're invited to do. I think Paul is working out of that kind of conceptualization. Whether he wrote out a chart or a list, I don't know, but it's helpful to think in these terms. Yeah.
Yeah, I think like across scripture, I mean, if you think about Jesus, for example, if we read the Gospel of Mark, I mean, he's portrayed as a new Moses. He's portrayed as a new Caesar. He's portrayed as God. He's portrayed as the Son of God, the Son of David. And like there are all these labels and layers, and not a single one of them by itself gets at like who Jesus fully is, right? There's this constellation of ideas and images that need to be brought together to crystallize who Jesus is. And I think the same thing's going on here, that Paul is layering the analogies to crystallize who he wants to portray the troublemakers as. And same thing with the non-troublemakers, the children of the promise.
Yeah, and I really like how he he weaves in Isaiah 54, which is kind of an eschatological hope of the redemption of Zion, and he also adds to that temporal eschatology, the promise, a spatial dimension to it by talking about the above.
Yeah.
And so, there is stuff happening spatially, and Ephesians is full of the spatial stuff that God is doing. Revelation is full of spatial stuff. So fascinating discourse here. All right. Well, anything else, Michael?
No, I think that's good for now.
Okay.
Yeah,
I
you got
do.
a parting shot?
When people talk, listen completely. Don't be thinking what you're going to say. Most people never listen. So that's also by Hemingway. Across the river and into the trees. So Paul begins this section by saying, those who want to be under the law, don't you hear what the law is saying? So, yeah.
Yeah, well, thanks for the insight and good conversation, Fred. And thanks to everybody who's listening and watching and supporting the podcast. One way you can really help us is to hit the like button or the subscribe button and or the share button. So we'd love for you to do that. That's an easy way for you to support us and to keep this thing going. So until next time, take care. We hope this
See ya.
helps. Aloha.
Interested in growing your ancient language skills but not sure where to start? Galotia House can help. From illustrated readers and short stories to lexicons and grammars, Galotia House offers a variety of resources for beginning, intermediate, and experienced ancient language learners. Head to glossahouse.com today. Galotia House, language resources for the global community.